The Game Boy was my childhood gaming companion. It went everywhere with me, and so did the games. Games were a part of my day-to-day life. And in my teenage years, I switched to console gaming, and gaming just wasn't the same. Even the Switch, it's portable, but it mostly stays home. I didn't have a gaming companion for my adult life until I got an Analogue Pocket. If you're not familiar with the Analogue Pocket, it is a retro-inspired handheld that plays original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games with no emulation, so it uses FPGA technology to play the original games just like Nintendo's original hardware would. And Analogue is a super cool company. They have made some really cool consoles like the Mega SG, which is a Super Nintendo that plays HDMI out in the highest fidelity. They make some really cool stuff. It is kind of the ultimate hipster brand. I love them. I'd consider myself a hipster, and they're called Analogue, and this channel is called DANALOGUE, so obviously I'm a big fan. So basically, this is the best way to play your old Game Boy games. I have had a pretty big collection of Game Boy games over the past few years, and I grew up playing a lot of really great Game Boy games. Like I said, the Game Boy was always a really big part of my life, and now I have this, and Game Boy, again, is a huge part of my life. One thing I do have to mention is Analogue really suffered from the supply chain shortages back in 2020, 2021. I actually ordered this back in November of 2022, and I just got it in September. It's almost a whole year to get my hands on one of these, but I gotta say, it was definitely worth the wait. So right out of the box, the Analogue Pocket feels like a premium product. It feels like opening an iPhone or a new Apple product. Just overall really high quality packaging, and taking off all these little protectors is always really satisfying. The initial setup is also really straightforward and easy. It just gives you a tutorial of what all the buttons do and some of the functionality of the device. Took me about 2 minutes overall to get this thing playing games right out of the box. And a QR code pops right up on the screen, so you can just scan that to download the latest update. Couldn't be easier. There's not much in the box other than a USB-C cord, but they do make a lot of accessories for the Analogue Pocket, and a lot of them I'd really like to get. Unfortunately, I haven't had the extra money to be buying accessories for this thing that was already pretty expensive. I didn't mention this, but the Analogue Pocket goes for $220, which is not cheap, especially for a handheld these days. But the accessories are very cool. They make a dock that allows you to use this almost like you would a Nintendo Switch and play it on your TV in really nice high quality. Now, there are some games that I'd really like to try playing on my TV. It works with 8-bit do controllers and any Bluetooth controllers. There's also a USB port, so you can use a USB controller. But in my opinion, the dock is definitely the most valuable accessory for the Analogue Pocket. It really adds a whole new functionality. Now, it's not only in handheld, but you can also use it to play games on your TV, so it becomes almost like a console. They also make adapters for Atari Lynx, Game Gear, as well as TurboGrafx 16, which I think is super cool. I don't have a collection of any of those games. I don't own one game on any of those consoles, but if I did, I would definitely be buying the adapters for that. I feel like it would probably look better and play better than it would on any of those original systems. The Game Gear was notoriously kind of crappy, and so is the Atari Lynx, and a TurboGrafx 16, it's hard to get these days, and it's a little bit expensive, and all of those old consoles just are a little finicky these days, and they don't look as good as they would with this system. I have this really funny idea of keeping a TurboGrafx 16. If you're not familiar, it's kind of the size of a credit card, but keeping one of those games like in my wallet, like Bonk's Adventure, and just pulling it out and popping it in my Analogue Pocket with the adapter and playing TurboGrafx 16 games that way. I think it is probably the coolest way to play those games in the modern era in 2023. They also make a really beautiful case, just an acrylic clear case for the Analogue Pocket, which I actually really need because I've been transporting this game in a really ghetto fashion. I kind of just wrap it in a microfiber towel and shove it in a padded pocket of my backpack, which works just fine. And then I always have a microfiber towel with me, but it's not the most safe way and not the most classy way to transport a handheld. Not really. One of the things that makes the Analogue Pocket feel like such a premium product is this beautiful screen. It is a 3.5-inch 16 by 1440 resolution, so it perfectly upscales old Game Boy games in just a really beautiful way. I haven't seen any screen on any handheld look better than this. One complaint I do have, and I'm just being nitpicky, is that there's quite a bezel around the outside of this thing. I feel like if it filled up this whole glass a little bit more, it would look a little bit more premium. It would look a little bit better, but it looks great as it is. Like I said, I'm just being nitpicky. But there is a lot more functionality to the screen. You can use different display modes. So for Game Boy Color games, you can use 5 different display modes, 5 different colors. There's also a Game Boy Pocket mode, which makes it look more like an old Game Boy Pocket. And there's also a Game Boy Light mode, which makes it look like kind of that crappy backlit look that the Game Boy Light had. That was only available in Japan, but it's really cool that they have that. There's also something called the Pinball Matrix mode, which makes it look like that red and black Virtual Boy look, which I think is super cool. For Game Boy Advance games, you can use the default analog mode, or you can use the Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP101 look, so you can make it look like any of the Game Boys you grew up playing. I think the 101 look is really cool. I'd really like to get my hands on an original one, but I don't see the need now that I have this thing to spend $100, $150 on a Game Boy Advance. This looks better than that will ever look. And you can also adjust the sharpness of the picture itself, which is kind of odd because it just makes it look a little bit more blurry. I don't see the point of that. And they also have a frame blending mode, which makes games look a little bit more smooth, a little bit less choppy. I don't notice a huge difference with this mode, but it's really cool that it's there. Taking a closer look at the system itself, you have a really nice stiff T-pad, as well as 4 face buttons, 2 concave, 2 convex, just like the Super Nintendo. And on the back, we have 2 shoulder buttons. The only complaint I have about these is they're really close to the cartridge. It's a little tight back there, and I feel like I might catch my finger on the edge of the cartridge and knock it out of its slot while I'm playing it, but that is not a real concern because it's never happened to me. So I'm just making stuff up at this point. On the left side of the console, you have a glow-in-the-dark power button. You hold it down to put this into sleep mode, and you also have the volume control. On each side of the console, you have the ports for the speakers, and I have to say, this console sounds great. I know a lot of Nintendo consoles kind of lack in the audio department, but this definitely takes it up a step. It sounds really good, and you even get really good stereo audio, where there's a left and a right channel. On the right side, you also have the SD card slot, and this is extremely important for one of the best functionalities of the Analogue Pocket, and that is save states. This adds what's called memories or save states, so you can save any of your games. I know a lot of the old Game Boy games didn't have a save functionality unless it had a battery in it, and even those games with batteries these days, they're all kind of dying and need to be replaced. So if you have a Pokemon game like I have where the battery died and you lost all your save data like I did, then you don't have to worry about that anymore because you can save with the SD card. The SD card also allows you to load emulators onto the Analogue Pocket. Now, this is something I haven't done yet. I've been enjoying its basic functionality of being a really cool elevated Game Boy, but I would really like to add emulators to it one day. I feel like it would improve the functionality and I'd get a lot more use out of this thing, but I haven't done it yet. Look out for a video on that though. I'm gonna be adding emulators to it and I cannot wait. And on the bottom of the console, you have a USB-C port, a headphone jack, and this bigger jack, which actually is a MIDI port. So this actually has an app on it called Analogue, where you can use the Analogue Pocket as a MIDI controller. Now, I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar, bass, drums, keys for a really long time. MIDI is something I don't have too much experience with, but I will really like to try out that functionality. So again, maybe I'll do a video on just the Analogue, the MIDI control for the Analogue Pocket. It sounds super cool. I really want to get more use out of this. I've been enjoying it so much, and I've only been using it for one aspect, and that is playing old Game Boy games. So I've really got to check that stuff out. The size of the Analogue Pocket is roughly the same as the original DMG Game Boy. So the DMG Game Boy was really chunky though. This is definitely slimmer, but overall the dimensions are about the same. The screen on the Analogue Pocket is obviously a lot bigger and a lot better, but that'll give you just an idea of how big this thing is. So I've been using this thing all the time. There's something so simple and fun about old Game Boy games, and I have a ton of them. A lot of them I played growing up, so it allows me to bring that nostalgia with me everywhere. There's nothing better than killing time by playing Tetris for 20 minutes, whether you're on the bus or the train, or you're just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen. I actually took this to the doctor's office, and they made me wait in the waiting room for a while, and I didn't really care because I had Tetris, and Tetris is like the perfect time killer. So if you do want to get yourself an Analogue Pocket, they are $220 $220, and I gotta say it's completely worth it. There's also been a few limited edition releases where they made a glow-in-the-dark analog pocket, which I think is super cool. This has a glow-in-the-dark little button on it, so I guess that's kind of where they got the idea. They also did some really cool transparent colorways for the analog pocket, and again, those sold out really fast. You could probably find them over on eBay and stuff, marked up terribly, but you can find them. If you really want one, you can get one. They actually made an atomic purple one that I love. Atomic purple. I want like everything atomic purple, everything that Nintendo made, but I missed the boat on that one, and I'm not getting one, and that's okay with me. So if you're like me and a sucker for authenticity when it comes to playing old games, that's why I have all of these old games. There's nothing better than having the original hardware to play them on, but I gotta say the Analog Pocket makes so much sense for me because it is a way to play those old games just on a really nice, beautiful modern screen. It is definitely the best way to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games without a doubt. If you emulate your games, I totally get it. I will probably be putting emulators on this and making it way more useful for me. But if you have the games already, then the Analog Pocket is essential. I've been trying to play games on my old Game Boys. I even got a Game Boy Advance SP recently, and it just doesn't hold up. It's really cool to have those original things, but I definitely won't be using them as much as the Analog Pocket. So $220 is a decent amount of money. There are a lot of other handheld emulators out there that will do pretty much the same thing as this, and you have all of those games on there, like the Ambernick RGX 35XX or Ambernick handheld. That thing I heard is pretty good. I don't have one, but I heard it's pretty good. There are tons of options out there for way less money than this if you just want to have old games with you, but I am a sucker for authenticity and nostalgia, and I already have a bunch of Game Boy games, so this makes sense for me as a handheld companion in my day-to-day life. So with that, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have a friend that you know enjoys old Game Boy games, send this video over to him and let him know about the Analog Pocket and let him know that there is a really great way to play all those old games. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel. Make a lot of videos about little handhelds and about PlayStation and about music and about movies and all kinds of stuff. So if you like this video, then you'll probably like my other ones. You can also check out my social media in the description below. On Instagram, I do a lot of day-to-day stuff on my stories over there. So all the movies I'm watching, all the games I've been playing, all kinds of stuff. So that's the best way to kind of keep in touch with me and see what's going on with me if you find this kind of stuff interesting. Keep your eyes out for more Analog Pocket content coming to the channel very soon. I want to thank you again for watching, and I'll see you soon.